Hey everyone, and welcome back. If you've been around the channel a while, then you'll know that I normally make videos about my Mazda MX-5. And if you've been around for a while, you'll also know that I haven't actually put out any videos in quite a long time. And there are a few reasons for that. The first one is actually that this car is remarkably reliable, and I actually haven't had any major jobs to do on the car for quite a few years now, apart from routine servicing, which I've actually covered already. In fact, the only thing that's actually happened on this car in the last 2 years is I've had the clutch spigot bearing replaced because it was getting a bit noisy, but I didn't actually do that myself. I sent it down to an MX-5 specialist who sorted it all out for me. And the other thing is we've just bought a house, so we've been spending quite a lot of time doing DIY work on there, and I do actually have another YouTube channel which is specifically about all of the work that I've done there. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, I'll put a link somewhere where you can click on and you can follow along there too. And in addition to that channel, I also have another 2 YouTube channels as well. One of them is just kind of when we go on holiday and we do various adventures. I tend to make videos about that. So if you like a sort of travelogue vlog type thing, I'll put a link for that one as well. And then I also have another YouTube channel which is about my music stuff. So some of you might know that I'm a music producer, and I do have a music producer related YouTube channel. I also haven't put out too much on that recently, but the plan is to start ramping up the content there in the next year or so. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, there's another one to join as well. So I have been putting out content in the last few years, just not really much on this channel. But all of that might be about to change, and that leads us neatly onto the subject for this video. So up until now, I haven't really had the need for a daily driver because we do have another car that we use for daily duties, and also I commute by train normally, so haven't really had much need to commute anywhere by car. But for various reasons, I'm now much more in need of a daily runabout. And I really do not want to start using my MX-5 as a daily driver. It's just too nice. I really don't want to drive it in winter. I don't want to do lots of short journeys in it. And I'm also not very keen on leaving it in public car parks these days, particularly since it's not that secure. It's quite easy to get into. And these cars are not all that common anymore. It used to be when I bought this that you would see one pretty much every time I took it out for a drive, whereas now Mark I MX-5s, they're a bit more of a novelty, a bit more kind of noticeable when you do see one. And that's exactly what you don't want when you're leaving a car parked in a station car park, for example. You really don't want something that's going to attract attention. What you want is something completely unremarkable, but also very reliable and actually pleasant to drive, something that's practical, but essentially is going to be invisible. And in terms of invisible street furniture, it doesn't get much more generic than this. A silver Mark II Ford Focus, literally the epitome of average. But don't let that fool you, because this car is actually surprisingly good to drive. And in fact, that is one of the reasons why the Mark I and Mark II Focus was so successful. This particular example is a 1.6 Zetec, and it's a 2005 model and has covered about 115,000 miles. So it's definitely been around the block a few times. But the engine and gearbox feel very good on this. The car still feels very good to drive. So it should make a pretty decent daily driver. So the story behind how I got this car is it was owned for a couple of years by some really good friends of ours, basically family. And they have just immigrated to the UK, and they needed some cheap, reliable runabouts while they were getting set up with jobs and schools. So they bought this car and they bought another Focus as well, and those have been their kind of family runabouts for the last 2 years. But now they're a bit more settled and they both got good jobs, so they've been able to upgrade their cars, and that meant that this little car was superfluous. But the thing is, they've kind of grown quite fond of it over the last couple of years, and they didn't want to just get rid of it. But it just so happened to coincide with me needing to get a daily runabout. So we did a deal, and I've now taken on what was affectionately called Mum's Badger. That's a long story. So in addition to this being my new daily driver, it's also going to be a bit of a project car. I'm going to sort out a few jobs that need looking at, but I'm also going to use it as a test bed to try out some new stuff that I'm actually a bit too scared to try on my MX-5. Things like paintwork detailing or bodywork repairs, kind of things that if I mess it up, it doesn't really matter too much because it is just a cheap car. Whereas my MX-5 is a bit of a different story for that sort of thing. So hopefully I can learn a bit in the process, and perhaps I can share some of that on the channel as well. But essentially this is going to just be a good little cheap runabout, and it doesn't really matter too much if I don't get things right. But with that said, I'm going to try and maintain this car and keep it on the road for as long as possible. And a final point to note here is you might be looking at this car and going, wow, how bland and generic. But the fact of the matter is that not so long ago, people said the same things about Escorts and Sierras and even Granadas, whereas nowadays those cars are cherished and revered. Right now there are still thousands of these Focuses on the road, but in a few years' time, a lot of them will have been traded in for newer cars or broken up for scrap. And suddenly at that point, these generic Ford Focuses will actually maybe start to be something a bit special again. So if I can keep this car on the road, perhaps it will stand a chance of being one of those cars that people actually are quite interested to see in the future. One can hope anyway. So next we're going to take a look around the car, and I'll tell you a little bit about its facts and features, and then we're going to jump into it and go for a drive and see just how well a 19-year-old Focus performs on today's roads. So if you're keen to join me for that, click on the next video and we'll see you there.